questions for these guys. Maybe we should start that with just asking what goes into being chairman of a lower league club, and how do your experiences compare to what we just seen from last night?
I'd love to say I was once the player, but no. It's clubs at the non-league level, and we are in Lewes playing Step 8 of the English Football League, which is the lowest level of what's called the national game. So we would need 7 back-to-back promotions to get into the Premier League. That's never ever going to happen. We employ 3 people, essentially. We have a guy who has the grand term of a chief exec, which basically he is our general manager. He does all our commercial deals. He does everything you could imagine around the club. We have an academy director who runs our academy, and a first team manager. And the first team manager is not employed full time, and the rest is just volunteers. So everything you see at our club is done by volunteers. On a match day, I combine, for example, being a chairman with doing the PA, standing on the turnstile for some of the game, carrying a stretcher I've done. I've had to take a minibus out of the ground that someone forgot and left it in our ground. New Year's Eve last year, my wife will testify this, she's at the back. New Year's Eve last year, I actually was kit man. And kit man, as you saw in the play here, clearing up the socks. If you could do that in 20 minutes, then you're a hero. Trust me. Footballers have no respect, even at our level. I think you're talking about an hour and a half to our job. So, non-league football at this level is run by volunteers.
Sounds very similar to the president of Barcelona.
Yes. we have a car park outside the ground. I don't even get a car parking space. So, I have to park down in the job centre car park down the road. But you do everything, and you have to be prepared to do everything.
Well, going on to, do you feel a connection with this?
I have to say, if I'm really, really honest, there were connections on a higher level. 1 or 2 managers in my time, I'll be mentioning no names here, so I see people with pads and pens. But there was a time or 2 where I was in a manager's office, and he said a club has come in and I think it's a really good deal for you. And I'm not sure whether that meant he was getting something for the club, but it would then also said, I think you could actually make it worth my time to make this happen. Which I said absolutely not. And then he actually got an apology the next day and a phone call saying I shouldn't have done that. But I won't mention names. So, there were obvious similarities, even though it's a lower level. Obviously, the level I played at, players weren't injecting themselves in their knees and stuff. I actually asked Patrick if that was, authentic research, and you said it was, a true story, people, that experiences that it obviously had, which I felt it must be, which is as interesting as it is sad in many ways, that young players can be so desperate to want to play football that they'll do absolutely anything in their power to do so. But yeah, it ran home, and I'll reiterate, I thought the performances and the play were both absolutely stunning.
Absolutely, and I think what resonating is just the ambition is at every level. Is that it doesn't matter whether you are playing World Cup semi-finals or at the bottom. It's that there is that hunger to get on, and I'm sure. Maybe that's something that you're fighting with all the time. How you're a small club, community club, but is there still that pressure to kick on?
Yeah, we've sort of since Patrick got involved in the club and I got involved in the club, we were playing at the highest level that we've ever played at, which was the Conference Premier. Our season essentially lasted about 5 months. We were relegated earlier than New Year. Lowest points total, every record you could possibly think of. We'd broken those by Christmas. And the club has slowly drifted down to a level. Now, part of that is on purpose, because we became a community club, so therefore we had to find our natural level. And that natural level meant a level where you didn't have sugar daddies throwing money at it, where you could control all the elements around the club. So we're now at a level, and you know, touch wood, we fell off the top of the league for the first time in about three months on Saturday with a draw. We've lost one game in the league. We lost in the FA Cup early on. We're having a really good season, but we still have to manage the expectations of the fans who expect us all of a sudden to start throwing money.
How many fans do you get?
We average about 550. And with our playing budget, none of this is secret. You can find all this information on our website. We pay just over 2,000 a week, and that's a gross amount.
To the kit man, or?
10% for the channel.
So we're at that level. We have really promising players, and we've all of a sudden started to see some of our players coming through from the academy. We've got a couple of players in our who have come through to our first team from our academy at the age of 16, which is fantastic. Although if you speak to them, you know, you could understand that these guys are only going to be footballers. There's you know, that's all their life is, and unfortunately, very few of them will ever make it. Very, very few. But we'll try and put some of our promising players on contract, to protect the interests.
You sounding like.
But it's absolutely true. We've one famous ex-Lewes player who's currently playing in the Premier League is Solly Marsh.
Famous?
I think he's famous. England under 21. He was never contracted to Lewes. We lost him. David Wheeler, who's now just joined QPR. We actually did have him on a contract, or we received payment for his training compensation. But we're now about looking at our youngsters. So we've got one particular guy who was on trial at Leicester last year and has been at Millwall and Bristol City at the moment. But interestingly enough, and this is really rare, he doesn't want to be a professional footballer. He wants to be a doctor.
Most players.
You can imagine the conversations our manager has. So our manager is a guy called Darren Freeman, who's ex-Fulham, Brighton. Guy, big tattoos up his arms. You know, he doesn't mince his words. When this young chap walks on to the field in September with gloves on because he wants to protect his hands, because he wants to be a doctor, you can imagine the kind of conversation.
Well, at least he'll know how to inject his own knee.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to offer his services around it. Yeah.
I'm sure plenty of you got your own questions as well, so I think we should open it up really about start here.
Well, I mean, one of the themes of the play was what happens at the end of your football career when sometimes the game leaves you behind. And I know you've played very closely alongside Paul Gascoigne, for example. I wonder if you had any thoughts about that and whether enough is done to help ex-players.
Well, for many it's very difficult. Obviously I've been fortunate, and others that go into the kind of few different worlds you can go in. There's a bit of TV, and there's quite a lot of TV now. There's a lot of channels. It's quite competitive and pays quite well. But a lot of the top players are going into that because that's what people want to hear from. And then there's management and coaching, and there are only a few posts. So that leaves a lot of players with other things to find in life. And it's been a perennial problem for a lot of players, a large percentage of players. They drift out of the game. Their salaries drop a lot, and now I know that a lot of them now pay fortunes, but if they're sensible enough, but as we all know, if you earn a lot, you tend to spend a lot. And then it suddenly drastically reduces or stops almost. The fame gradually dissipates over a period of time. Often a lot of players try a business, it doesn't work, they lose money. They get depressed, some turn to drink, have problems, the marriages break up. I think the divorce rate of footballers from the age of something like 35 to 40 is something ridiculous like 70%, so then they lose a lot more. And a lot of them do drift into, deep depression and sadness. So not all of them, but a lot of them do have problems. So it sounds like a great life, and it is a great life. And for some right at the top that do well and then find something else that is, but for a lot it's not. It's difficult. And however much you enjoy in your playing career, it can go wrong.
Do you think that the Premiership does enough to help grassroots football, or do you think there's more they can do? Or because there's so much money.
It's primarily the job of the FA to look after grassroots football, which obviously they try and do. Most of the money is in the Premier League, though. We have a very unique situation in our particular country that we have 3 governing bodies, whereas most countries have 1, and they kind of all, well, they only have 1, so they're all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet. Whereas here, we've got the Football Association, we've got the Premier League, and obviously we've got the Football League. So you've got 3, and they're all kind of fighting each other, and the Premier League generally doesn't care about anything but the Premier League. They certainly don't care that much about the international side or perhaps grassroots. They do put money into the grassroots because it obviously filters down. There's a lot going in, and they probably do more than they've done in recent years, and they're getting better at it. But it's not their primary concern. It is the FA's concern, but they have to generate money from internationals and the FA Cup. So it's one of the great problems of the English game, that we're not all in it together, and it's hard to really see that changing.
I say something relatively controversial. I think the Premier League actually do quite a lot for the grassroots game if the grassroots know where to go. So, for example, we built 2 years ago a 3G facility next to our ground, which is used by our academy. We've got a boys' academy and a girls' academy, and we rent it out the rest of the time. That cost 1.2 million, and 900,000 came from essentially the Premier League.
Good to hear.
My view on the FA is slightly different, and I think, well, I mean, I'll give you one interesting point. The winners of the FA Cup get £7.5 million. Manchester City, Chelsea, Arsenal, Tottenham. Do they really need £7.5 million? What I believe should happen with especially the FA Cup, is that if you play at the FA Cup in the opening rounds, and let's say we go in at the second round, which is the preliminary round. If we win that, we win £1,950, which to us is you know, that's okay. We'll have that. But if we lose in that round, we get nothing. And if we've had to play away, and let's say, for example, this is a real example. I was talking to some guys before this. We're playing in the FA Trophy on Saturday. We're playing Truro City, and we have to pay Truro City's expenses, which is a 600-mile round trip and an overnight hotel. If we lose that game, and there's £5,000 prize money, we actually lose money by being in the competition. So what I would like to see is, I would like to see the money distributed at the top end of the FA Cup to the teams that don't need it. I mean, they're playing the final and the semi-finals at Wembley. They get a share of those gate receipts as well. Distribute that money to the preliminary rounds of the competitions and give the losers a payment. That's what I'd like to see from the FA.
Interesting question about you just talking about the youth academy. Are you still getting lots of kids coming through playing football? Because I get the impression, and looking around parks as well, as you drive around on Sunday mornings, that they're just not playing football anymore. As many people are playing football.
We are in an area where there are so many academies, it's getting a little bit silly. So within probably about 10 miles of where Lewes is, there are 5 academies, excluding Brighton. And we have a massive competition for spaces. So we can take 35 boys and 15 girls, and I think we're currently running at 27 boys and 14 girls. And we get obviously paid by the government for the education part. And again, that's part of our profit and loss. So we would employ, because we have to employ tutors, we have to employ coaches. And you have to employ those at the start of the season. And you can often have people drop out of your academy, and when they drop out, you lose your funding. So there is a huge concentration, and anybody can come along, doesn't matter who you are, and set up an academy on your doorstep.
Who were the 5 clubs?
It's not necessarily clubs. There's one called the Russell Martin Academy. Russell Martin, who's Norwich professional, comes from the area, has set up a academy within a few miles of where we're based. But you've also got Eastbourne, Hastings, Burgess Hill. Crawley Town got rid of their academy, which we thought at first was positive, because we'd see some of the players drip down, but they just go elsewhere.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question about the link between theatre and football, and do you think that more footballers should come and watch theatre, and why do you think that they might benefit or just enjoy what theatre has to offer?
I absolutely think that. I mean, I think it'd be great. I'm sure some do. I've never seen one.
Round the south. Jerry Francis was there.
There's lots of old footballers. In fact, the first time I've seen this is the second time I've seen this play. The first time I saw it.
Which was best?
The manager was really good in the other one.
He's too southern.
I love you, Gary. The first time I saw it, Roy Hodgson was there. That didn't end well. If you'd have been the manager on that one, he might have lifted us to beat the mighty Iceland. Who knows? I'm not sure there is particularly a link. Not that I know of. Obviously, it's a live performance, which is very similar to players, and I'm sure.
Here are the top search results, starting with one from Wikipedia.
I'm trying to tweet this.
That's our producer, ladies and
That's how footballers, you see.
He's from Australia.
But I mean, I got into theatre because my ex-wife and still best friend. It's unusual. I was acting and did a couple of plays, and I got really into it. And I go at least once a month, probably, to watch plays. So I would thoroughly recommend it. I think it's great. I'm sure other players will be the same. I don't know actually whether any current players go.
Maybe it's just hard to get
You're more in touch with them.
That play named after you was brilliant, and even in Gary Lineker.
We've all had a play name. I went to the I saw the premiere of that. They asked me along. It was at the time when my eldest George, well, he's my only one at the time, was ill in the hospital, and they actually asked if they minded if they went ahead, and they said they'd put some money towards Great Ormond Street, which was really great. But it was really because sitting in the audience, and every time there was kind of a joke about me, the whole audience would look at me. Really weird.
Yeah, I was wondering about. I loved that play as well. I saw that back in the day. I won it in a competition from 442 magazine.
You won the play.
I won the tickets. I was wondering when you talk about grassroots football and how all the issues related to it being so professionalised and capitalist nowadays in men's football, where does women's football fit in?
It's growing.
And when are we going to see it on Match of the Day? And what do we need to
Well, you won't see it on Match of the Day because we do Match of the Day is just the Premier League, but you see it on the BBC. I mean, it's growing. It's getting much bigger, much more competitive. The standard of women's football in this country is growing really quickly. The popularity of it is growing really quickly, which is great because the more people that are into football, the better for those of us that earn a living from it.
Do you think there's one day there might be that the Match of the Day includes whatever the name of the top league for women is?
It might have its own Match of the Day. But the Match of the Day has to be the Premier League. It's a deal with the Premier League. It can only be that. So, I mean, there's other programmes that will show we can't even show the Championship games. It's all a matter of TV rights. But
well, that's how it is now. But I'm wondering if it might ever one day.
In terms of equality, I think I'm right in saying Lewes was the first team to pay the men and women the same.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we saw it as something that we felt we could do, that we thought was right. Now, you know, there's interesting how it's perceived in the media. We have budget parity, not pay parity. And what that means is that the budget we allocate to our men's team is exactly the same as we allocate to our women's team. We actually had a situation a few weeks ago where, for the first time ever in the club's history, we paid our women's team more in a week than our men's team.
Great, Man City did the same.
Well, absolutely. Now, one of the things that we're trying to push for is that our women play on the same ground, the same pitch, everything like that. We're trying to push for more professional clubs or the Super League clubs to do exactly the same, because it's mad that, for example, Brighton are looking at moving. They currently play at Lancing FC. They're talking about going to Crawley. Well, why can't you play on the Amex?
Spurs ladies don't even play in London.
They play at Chesham.
We
Yeah.
were allowed one game at the end of last season because White Hart Lane was being
Well,
demolished.
Man U don't even bother, do they?
No,
So-
No.
They're outside
Which is
London.
bewildering.
Yeah.
Manchester City, on the other hand, actually, that's the reason I mentioned them. They've got a fantastic
Yeah, it's
ground
next door.
at
Yeah.
the training centre there,
Yeah.
right next to it. It's brilliant.
I would love to see, you know, the more equality and more things, and I think that it will happen, definitely over time. I think the game is getting stronger and stronger. Unfortunately, the FA and the Mark Sampson thing really didn't help the cause and the game, but I think that they can pretty quickly recover from that.
The thing I want, can I just interject on women's football? The thing that I had no idea about, which I learned due to the Lewes FC equality campaign, was that, when was it, Stuart? In the 1920s, women's football attracted crowds of 40, 50,000.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean,
And
it
then
was
the-
a massive spectator sport.
The
And then the FA banned
FA's
it.
decision to crush
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's war.
I had no idea about that. And so the argument that women's football will never attract the same crowds as the men, I just don't think it's true. It just needs to be promoted.
Yeah, no, they've had to consciously crush it
Yeah.
because of the men coming back from the war
Yeah.
and for the kind of male
But
ego.
there's room for both.
Yeah.
Of course there is, and it would be better for the
It
game.
was the same in America with baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, one of the things we find really bizarre is that our ladies team play in the Premier League. So you've got Super League 1 and 2, and then there's the Premier League. And we're in that one. They have to play at 2 o'clock on a Sunday. They can't play any other time. 2 o'clock on a Sunday. That's what the FA say they can play. We would love to have a situation where we played a double header on a Saturday, where we play at 3 o'clock, ladies play at 5:30, or vice versa. We would love that, but they are not allowed to do it.
Can I ask a question about the press?
Yes.
As you hear. So I'm a Borough fan, and we spend a lot of our time in the Championship, and it just seems weird to me how little coverage, and I think on television and a little bit on radio, though 909 tries to address that, but how little coverage the Championship gets, and the usual answer is, oh well, there's not enough people watch it. But actually, when you add the numbers up of the people, of the actual crowds and the attendances between the Premiership and the Championship, it's nowhere near the difference between the coverage between the Premiership and the Championship. So, although it seems like it's market forces in a way, it doesn't seem that. Is it just lazy journalism?
Well, I could try and defend my own paper a bit, but I will accept the broader point. I think you're probably right. I do think there's a cult of personality that's. I don't think it's peculiar to English football, but I think it's more pronounced in English football. A cult of manager personality that we love. And I think we find readership. We're looking. The matches are all on television now, as we know. We're looking to try and sort of tell different stories, I guess, around it, and a lot of that is personality based. I think sometimes maybe too much, but it's what people seem to thrive off. It's what the clashes, Guardiola v Mourinho. It's that sort of theatre of it. And I think there's a great line in the play about something about sort of they love it. People love the greed, and they actually sort of thrive off it. And I think that. I guess papers are increasingly, we don't feel like we're sort of necessarily reporting on ball in the net. We're trying to bring characters to life. And I think that's an explanation. I don't think it's the whole explanation. I don't think it justifies it sometimes. I'm a Cambridge United fan. I can't find mention of my own team in the paper. I think that's one reason for it. I think the way that television, I think the Champions League through television, that show has become so big that I think the paper coverage reflects that.
Yeah, it's ultimately it's about the amount of people that are interested in it, isn't it? It's like viewing figures, and certainly talking television, it's about figures which generates other things and revenue, etc. But Premier League is box office. And it's the same in any sport, isn't it? I mean, if you're going to watch horse racing, there are going to be less people watch some event at Leicester than there will be watching the Grand National Entry. You know, and it's the same in newspapers.
Also, I would just say the coverage has grown. I mean, the other thing is, I mean, we're talking about players, you know, not underplaying that modern players struggle, but you actually go back 20 years. I mean, there was no sort of legend business at all. Football coverage was, in my paper, was a page. Now we have a 20-page pull-out on a Monday. You know, I think the whole thing has grown. I still take your point, but actually the coverage of sport and of football is huger by a million miles.
And you get millions of hits. It's global.
Yeah, exactly. And these personalities, Mourinho, Guardiola, are.
And the game at the very top now is so good. It is so good. I mean, they're top level players, and
I have to say, I mean, I did a book club. I did a book on Bobby Moore, and I've said the more I've looked back, were the good old days that good? I mean, I guess that's again one of the debates that's maybe raised by the players, sort of nostalgia, and we like to tell ourselves things were great, but you get to see Messi on a perfect pitch with wonderful cameras doing skills, rather than the crappy old ground being kicked up in the air. What's that?
Shouldn't Barnes at the Macarena? Would you
Macarena dances.
No, you have the same thing, I
We've got a question that was sent in from Twitter, if that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
So it's for you, Gary, and it's who were the best players you played with, and can we have one from Spain and one from England?
The best player I played with a lot of really good players. Dan Hoddle was unbelievably good. I played with Brian Robson, who was amazing. But I suppose being a striker, I'll go for selfishness, and that would be probably Peter Beardsley, because we just had this relationship that worked. People often say Gazza. Gazza was probably the most talented player that I played alongside.
Tim Geordie.
But the problem with Gazza was that he was so good that he'd only ever pass you the ball if he knew you had no choice but to give it in straight so yeah, probably those two. And one from Spain. I presume they played with Schuster, was an unbelievably good player, but I suppose they want a Spaniard. I played with Chiqui Bergerstein, who now is kind of runs things at Manchester City. He was a really good player. Alexanko, Baquera, lots of good players, but it wasn't the great Barcelona then that it is now. Sad, well, probably, I say sadly, I should say gladly, because I wouldn't have gone.
Yeah, I guess it's more touching on the management side of things. Towards the end of the play, you had, say, I can fight my way back up from youth team all the way back up to conference level, but if you look at the Premier League, you haven't really got many English managers in there at all. The only English manager you've really got in there who's promising at the minute, Dyche and Howe, are about to get promoted into that division rather than appointed. I guess kind of how do you see English management evolving over the next 15, 20 years when those opportunities are probably even going to get less and less as the Premier League gets richer and richer?
Well, I think one of the problems is our fault, really, is that television in our particular country is actually quite an attractive career path.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, all the top players now are looking to try and break into television. Even in the last few years, you've got Ferdinand, Gerrard, Lampard, Scholes, all the really great intelligent players. Not that really great intelligent players always make the best managers; they don't. But in other countries, that's a little bit different. It's kind of it's perceived as a more substantial job than perhaps it is here. I think it will change though. We've never encouraged our best players to go into coaching. We make it really difficult for them. It's kind of an elongated process to actually get to it. But I think we'll improve, because I think we're also teaching them how to be better coaches than all that stuff about position and maximum opportunity nonsense that they used to have at the FA that kind of took us back. And we're still suffering from it, because a lot of our British coaches, if you like, play a kind of, let's put it this way, they don't play the Guardiola like.